26 years of marriage, and the one thing Renata never figured out was that I keep records of everything. That's the part she underestimated. She looked at a man who coached Little League on Saturday mornings and drove a 7-year-old Silverado and brought her coffee in bed on anniversaries, and she decided I was soft. She decided I was the kind of man who would sign whatever was put in front of him and be grateful for the privilege. She was wrong, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got to that conference room, because the ending, and it was an ending, only lands the way it should if you understand what came before it. And what came before it was, for a long time, a life I was genuinely proud of. Welcome back to Dad's Calm Revenge. Pour yourself something, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories always think they're the smartest one in the room. They are not. Subscribe so you never miss one. I met Renata at a company picnic in the summer of 1998. I was 32 years old and working as a project manager for a mid-sized civil contracting firm outside of Nashville, Tennessee. She was there with a friend who worked in the accounting department, and she laughed at something I said, a genuinely terrible pun about potato salad that I will not repeat here, and that was it for me. Something locked into place. The kind of thing you can't explain to someone who hasn't felt it. We dated for 2 years. We got married on a Saturday afternoon in April of 2000 at a small church south of Franklin. Her mother, Dolores, cried through the entire ceremony. Her sister, Beth, was maid of honor and gave a toast that was equal parts sweet and embarrassing. My best man was my brother Calvin, who wore a tie for the first and, to my knowledge, last time in his adult life. I loved that day. I want to be honest about that. Whatever came later, I loved that day completely. The early years were the way early years are supposed to be. Tight on money, rich on everything else. I was climbing at the firm. Renata had been working as an office manager for a physical therapy group, and she was good at it. Organized, reliable, the kind of person who kept everything running without making a show of it. We bought our first house in 2003. Our daughter, Simone, was born in 2004. Our son, Cole, in 2007. I'll tell you the version of the next decade that I believed at the time. 2 people building something together, raising kids who turned out better than either of us deserved, watching the business grow in ways I hadn't fully let myself predict. By the time I was 45, I had left the contracting firm and co-founded my own. Leland Pruitt Construction Management, named for me and my partner, Walt Pruitt, who I'd known since we were both junior project managers making nothing and sharing a parking spot. Walt is methodical and stubborn, and has never once in 30 years told me what I wanted to hear if it wasn't true. I trust him with my life. By the time I was 50, the company was profitable enough that I stopped checking our bank balances every morning out of anxiety and started checking them out of habit. By 52, we'd landed 2 consecutive state infrastructure contracts, a bridge rehabilitation in Murfreesboro and a drainage overhaul in Clarksville, and the company was doing things I'd drawn on napkins 15 years earlier. Renata stopped working when Simone started kindergarten. That was her choice. I supported it. What I didn't see coming was the slow, gradual way she came to think of the money as hers by default, rather than ours by partnership. It crept in quietly. The way she talked about the firm to her friends, possessively, like it was a stock she'd happened to own, rather than something I had staked the first 15 years of my career on. The way she'd wave off questions about our finances at dinner parties. Oh, Raymond handles all that. Raymond, never my husband in those moments. Raymond, like I was staff. I told myself it was nothing. People have different relationships with money. She wasn't dishonest. She wasn't cruel. She was just, and this is the word I keep landing on, comfortable. Comfortable in a way that made her careless. The first real crack happened about 4 years ago. I came home from a site visit on a Thursday afternoon, something about a retaining wall specification in Brentwood that turned out to need a full redraw, and found Renata on the back porch with Beth. They were having wine and talking in the way women talk when they've been at it for a while, and are past the point of monitoring the volume. I came in, through the side gate, and they didn't hear me. He's never going to see it coming, Renata was saying. Beth said something I couldn't make out. Because he trusts me, Renata said. That's how Raymond works. He just trusts. He always has. I stood very still next to the rose bushes Renata had planted the second summer we lived there. The ones I'd helped her stake after a late frost nearly took them out. And the attorney says it's solid? Beth asked. Tight as anything, Renata said. By the time it gets to court, everything he has is going to look like everything we built together. I didn't say anything. I went back through the side gate, walked around the block twice, came in through the front door, and said something about the traffic on I-65. That night I lay in the dark, next to my wife of 20-plus years, and thought about what I'd heard with the same quiet processing that I use when a project is over budget, and the only thing that matters is the solution. I didn't feel betrayed, exactly. That sounds strange to say, but what I felt was something closer to clarity. Like a picture coming into focus that had been slightly blurred for years. 2 weeks later, I called Walt. I need a corporate restructure, I said. Okay, he said. What kind? The kind that takes 6 months and involves your brother-in-law, the tax attorney. Walt has a brother-in-law named Jerry Souza, who is, without exaggeration, the most detail-oriented human being I have ever met. He once sent back a contract because a comma was misplaced in a subordinate clause. I called him the same afternoon. Jerry, I said, I need to reorganize how I hold my equity in Leland Prute. Legally, cleanly, every document filed properly. I need this to be something I can defend line by line in front of a judge. He didn't ask me why. That's what I like about Jerry. He understands that people call him when the reasons are private, and the execution has to be flawless. What followed was 14 months of quiet, meticulous, entirely legal work. The kind of work that is boring to describe and enormously consequential in practice. My equity stake in the company had always been held personally. Just my name on the interest, simple and direct. What Jerry and I did was formalize a structure that had existed in the original partnership agreement, but had never been fully activated. A management entity. A holding structure. The interest I'd brought to the founding of the company. My professional licenses. My existing client relationships. The 2 years of sweat equity before we turned a profit. Was reclassified and documented properly. In ways that reflected what it had always actually been, what any honest accountant would confirm it was, just never spelled out explicitly. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was moved offshore. Nothing was dishonest. Every step was documented. Every fair market valuation was certified by an independent appraiser. Every filing was time-stamped and submitted through proper channels. What changed was the shape, not the substance. And the shape, when examined carefully by someone who knew what they were looking at, told a very specific story. Calvin reviewed it. Calvin, who had gone to law school at 38 after spending his 30s doing commercial real estate closings for a firm in Memphis, had seen every variety of marital asset dispute the Mid-South could produce. He read every document 3 times. This is clean, he said. It has to be, I said. Raymond. He looked at me across the table with the expression he'd used since we were kids. The one that means I know exactly what you're doing and I have chosen to be useful instead of judgmental. Are you planning to tell me what's happening? Not yet, I said, but soon. Renata filed on a Wednesday in January. She had retained an attorney out of Belle Meade, a woman named Gretchen Holt, who had a reputation in Nashville family law circles that I had, in the preceding 8 months, taken the time to research thoroughly. Holt was good, very good. She had retained a forensic CPA named Dr. Aldridge to review our marital finances, and Dr. Aldridge had, I would later learn, already spent considerable time with our tax records and the company's financial statements. Renata's demands were laid out with the confidence of someone who believed the math was simple. Half the company, the house, alimony at a figure that I read twice just to confirm I hadn't misread it. A support arrangement that would have lasted, according to her attorney's calculation, until I turned 72. I read it at the kitchen table on a Thursday morning, with a cup of coffee that went cold while I was reading. Then I called Calvin. It's time, I said. Been ready since October, he said. Here is something I want to say about Renata's family, because it matters to how the mediation session went. They are an operatic group. Not malicious. Not, at their core, bad people. But they have never in the history of their family approached a conflict quietly. When Renata told Dolores she was filing, Dolores told Beth, Beth told their cousin Priya, Priya told the rest of the cousin network, and by the time our first formal mediation session arrived, Renata had assembled a support structure that would have been impressive if it weren't happening in a conference room in a law office in Green Hills at 9 in the morning. Beth was there. Dolores was there. Priya. A friend named Sandra who I had met maybe 4 times. 2 women I recognized from Renata's book club, who I didn't think had ever actually spoken to me. Renata's attorney, Gretchen Holt, polished and prepared, with Dr. Aldridge sitting beside her with a laptop and 2 external hard drives. My side, Calvin, in a very nice suit, reading glasses on, a legal pad that was, I noticed, already covered in notes he'd written before we sat down. Renata looked composed. She was wearing a blazer I'd bought her for her 50th birthday, a deep burgundy that she'd always liked. And that looked, I thought, like a choice that had been deliberate. She had the controlled, pleasant expression of a person who has been told by her attorney that today is a formality, that the outcome is settled, that the only question is the details. Her attorney opened with a statement about the length of the marriage, Renata's contributions to our household, the children, the years of support she had provided while I built the business. It was all accurate, technically. It just told a very selective version of what was true. Calvin stood up when it was our turn and spoke for about 90 seconds. He said we were prepared to be fully transparent, that we had provided comprehensive documentation of my financial position, and that he believed a careful review would be illuminating for all parties. Illuminating, Gretchen Holt said, not a question. I think so, Calvin said pleasantly. The way a man is pleasant when he knows something the room doesn't. Dr. Aldridge presented first. He had done serious work. I won't dismiss it. He had tracked the company's financials over 12 years, projected future earning potential, analyzed my compensation structure, identified the equity interest. The number he put on it was significant. Renata listened to the presentation with her hands folded and her expression carefully neutral, but I saw her eyes move to Beth twice. Small, quick looks, the kind that mean, see? Then Calvin submitted ours, the restructuring documents, the partnership agreement amendments, the management entity filings, the independent appraisals. The timeline specifically, the timeline of when certain structures were formalized, what the founding documents said, what my original capital contribution and sweat equity contribution had been formally classified as. Gretchen Holt went through it quietly. The room was very still. Dolores had stopped whatever she was about to say to Sandra. Dr. Aldridge had his laptop open and was reading something on the screen. With an expression that shifted, incrementally, from professional confidence to something more guarded, Gretchen leaned over to Renata and spoke in a low voice. Renata responded, shorter, sharper. Gretchen spoke again. But the moment I had been moving toward for 14 months, the thing I had turned over in my mind, on late evenings in the office and early mornings when I couldn't sleep, and once, memorably, at the top of a fire escape on a job site in Clarksville, where I'd gone to think. That moment was still coming. It came when Calvin said, I'd like to direct everyone's attention to Exhibit 31. He set a folder in front of Gretchen Holt. He set a copy in front of the mediator, a retired family court judge named the Honorable Arthur Nance, who had the particular stillness of someone who has heard every possible version of every possible story and is no longer surprised by any of them. He gave one to Dr. Aldridge. Nance opened his copy and read it. His eyes moved across the page. He didn't react visibly. He was too experienced for that. But he set the folder down with a particular deliberateness and looked over to the top of his reading glasses at Gretchen Holt. Counselor, he said, can you tell me the date of the waiver document your client submitted, claiming modification of the original asset agreement? The room was quiet in a way rooms rarely are. Gretchen Holt looked at her copy. She looked at it for longer than she should have needed to. When she looked up, her expression had changed. Your Honor, she caught herself. Mr. Nance, our position is that the waiver represents a mutual understanding reached between the parties during the date, Nance said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. On the signature line. Your client's signature. What is the date? There was a pause. Let me explain what was in that folder, because the specificity matters. When Renata's team had submitted their financial documentation, they had included a waiver document. a paper that purported to show that I had, at some point during our marriage, agreed to modify the asset protection provisions we'd put in place in our original partnership agreement. If legitimate, it would have significantly altered how my company equity was classified. It was not legitimate. Calvin had caught it during his review, a mistake so foundational that he'd actually called me that night and said, simply, "Raymond, someone made a very bad error." The date on Renata's signature on that waiver was 11 months before the partnership agreement itself had been formally established. She had signed a modification of a document that did not yet exist. I don't know who made that error. I genuinely don't. I don't know if it was Renata, or someone she'd hired, or someone she'd trusted who had let her down spectacularly. What I know is what Calvin found, and what the document examiner Calvin retained confirmed in a formal written report. The waiver showed characteristics inconsistent with an authentic original signature. The notary stamp on the document, when the notary was contacted, produced no record of the notarization. Nance looked at the document for a long moment. Then he looked at Renata. Renata was looking at the table. "Miss Leland," Nance said. She had been going by her maiden name since filing. "I'm going to need a recess, and I'm going to need your attorney to understand that what I'm looking at is something I take very seriously." Beth made a sound from the far end of the table. I think it was her coffee cup hitting the saucer harder than she intended. Dolores, who had been sitting with her hands in her lap and the expression of a woman expecting a parade, was now looking at the window with her mouth slightly open. Sandra, to her credit, said nothing. She probably had the most accurate read in the room of what was happening. There were 3 recesses. I watched Renata go in and out of the small conference room, off the hallway where her team had retreated. Each time she came back, something was different about her face. The first time, she looked tense. The second time, she looked scared. The third time, she looked like a woman who had stopped arguing with a situation and started trying to figure out what came next. Calvin drank terrible conference room coffee and reviewed his legal pad. I looked out the window at the parking garage across the street and thought about a drainage project. I had a site visit for the following Thursday and whether the weather forecast was going to hold. "You doing all right?" Calvin asked. "Fine," I said. "Anything you want to say to her when this wraps up?" I thought about it. 26 years, 2 kids, the church in Franklin and Calvin in a tie, and Dolores crying through the entire ceremony. The kitchen where we'd argued about paint colors, and the backyard where Cole had learned to throw a spiral, and the porch where I'd heard Renata tell her sister I never saw it coming. "No," I said. Calvin nodded once. "Good answer," he said. The outcome came 3 weeks later in the formal settlement. Gretchen Holt had filed a motion to withdraw from the case. Her replacement was a younger attorney working out of a smaller office downtown who had, I suspected, significantly less enthusiasm for the case than his predecessor. The negotiation was shorter than I expected. Renata got the house. I want to be clear about that. She got the house, and she got the joint savings and investment accounts. A little over $300,000 split down the middle, which is what the joint assets actually were. She got one of the vehicles. She got a support arrangement. Real support. Real support. Not punitive, because whatever had happened between us, I am not a man who leaves someone with nothing, but structured according to Tennessee guidelines for a marriage of this length, which is meaningfully different from the number her original filing had named. She did not get the company. She did not get the equity. She did not get 10 years of income from a business I had spent the better part of my adult life building from 2 guys and a shared parking spot into something that had my name on the door. And there was an ongoing matter, a referral from Nance's office to the appropriate authorities regarding the waiver document. I'm not the prosecutor. I don't control what happens next. What I know is what Calvin submitted and what the document examiner found, and that those findings are now part of an official record. I moved out of the house in April, bought a place in East Nashville, a craftsman with a front porch and a backyard that backs up to a creek. I furnished it simply and without ceremony, the kind of house that looks like a man who has run out of interest in performing for anyone. Simone drove up from Chattanooga to help me move. She is 20 years old and studying structural engineering at UT. I have, as you might imagine, no idea where she gets it. And she drove 3 hours on a Saturday to help her father carry boxes and didn't ask for anything in return. Cole couldn't make it. He was in his first semester of a master's program in Denver and had a deadline I wouldn't let him blow. He called while we were unloading the truck and said, "Dad, I'm sorry I can't be there." And I told him there was nothing to apologize for, because there wasn't. Simone and I sat on the back porch when the last box was in. Cold sodas, late afternoon light coming off the creek, the sound of whatever birds have taken up residence in the yard behind mine. I still don't know what kind. I should find out. "Dad," she said after a while, "did you know? Before everything started." "I suspected," I said. "For how long?" "Long enough." She turned her cup in her hands. "Were you ever scared?" "Of what?" "That it wouldn't be enough. That you'd done all that work and it still wouldn't hold." I thought about that seriously. She's her mother's daughter in some ways. The directness, the precision of the question. She deserved a precise answer. "No," I said, because I hadn't done anything I wasn't prepared to explain. Every document, every step, every decision, I could account for all of it. I'd been accountable my whole career. I just made sure I was accountable here too. "And you waited," she said. "I waited," I said. She nodded slowly, watching the creek. "That's very you." "I suppose it is," I said. 3 months after the settlement, on a Tuesday morning in early August, I was at the office, reviewing the subcontractor bids on a commercial development outside of Hendersonville when my assistant said I had a call from a number she didn't recognize. I almost sent it to voicemail. "Leland," I said. Silence. Then, "Raymond." Renata's voice, quieter than I had ever heard it. The performance stripped out of it, the audience gone, just her voice. "I shouldn't be calling," she said. "No," I said. "You shouldn't. I just wanted to." A pause. I don't know what I wanted. I sat back in my chair and looked at my desk. The bids. The site photographs pinned to the corkboard. The framed photo of Simone and Cole at the Ryman Auditorium 3 Christmases ago, both of them in bad Santa hats, both of them laughing at something off camera. "Renata," I said, "there's an active investigation. You know that. Your attorney knows that. You should not be on this call." "I know." "Then why are you?" She didn't answer that. Maybe she didn't have an answer. Maybe the answer was something neither of us needed to say out loud. "I hope you find a way to be okay," I told her, and I meant it. Not warmly, not with any tenderness left in it, but the way you mean something that is simply true. The way I might mean it about someone I'd read about in a newspaper who was having a hard year. I hoped she'd be okay because she was the mother of my children, and I had loved her once, and the world is better when people are okay. That's all. Not more than that. "Goodbye," I said. I hung up. I sat for a moment in the office. My name on the building directory, my desk, my work, my company, all of it still standing exactly where I had built it. Then I picked up the phone and called Walt. "You have 10 minutes to look at the Hendersonville bids," I said. "Already have them open," he said. "Good," I said. "Let's get to work. Here is the thing I want to leave you with, because people ask me variations of the same question. Am I bitter? Am I angry? Do I miss her? Bitter, no. Anger would require me to have been surprised, and I was not surprised. I was prepared. There's a difference. Angry sometimes, but not at Renata, at the waste of it, at what 26 years could have been if the trust had run both directions. That makes me sad more than angry, and even the sadness is quieter than you'd think. Do I miss her? I miss who I thought she was. I miss the woman at the company picnic who laughed at a terrible pun and didn't care who saw her teeth. I don't know if that woman was ever fully real. I think she was real in pieces, maybe. I don't think people are entirely one thing or entirely another. But here is what I know for certain, the only thing I'd want anyone to walk away from this story understanding. Quiet men are not passive men. We're not drifting. We're watching. We're documenting. We are building something, and we know exactly what we're building, and we know exactly where every piece of it is. When the moment comes, we don't need to raise our voices. We just open the folder. She brought 6 people to that conference room. I brought 1 document and my brother in a good suit. The folder did the rest. If this story meant something to you, hit the like button and subscribe. There are more stories coming. Real ones. About regular people who did the quiet, patient work and came out the other side with something worth keeping. We'll be here every week. Come back.